Rudest thing a waiter has ever said to you? I visited Italy during high school and had no idea cranberries and cranberry juice was mostly an American thing. I asked a waiter for cranberry juice and he responded with, "And where would I get that from? The moon." My parents laughed their asses off. Silly waiter. Moonberries are from the moon, not cranberries. Went with a friend and her family to dinner to one of their favorite restaurants. They're white, I'm East Asian. Waiter comes over to take our order, asks everyone what they want, then looks at me and says, "Let me guess." Rice. Big laugh from him, crickets from everyone else. Never went back to that place again. So awkward it hurts. I was a waiter for a long time. I made decent money and liked working nights and being around people and staying in emotion. But it takes a certain type to enjoy the work and do it well. I learned most of what I know about waiting tables from an older guy who took me under his wing when I got my first server job. It was a really nice, expensive restaurant, and new servers were expected to back waiter for a few weeks before they were trusted enough to take tables themselves. So I was back waitering for this guy, who I'll call M, and this happened. Party of 8 couples, celebrating something, not a birthday, not an anniversary. Probably business guys closed a deal and taking the wives out for a night on the town. Cocktails flow, appetizers disappear. Finally M is making the rounds, taking orders. He's already discussed the night's specials in detail, already sold a couple of $40 plus entrees. He gets to the loud guy. This guy has a few drinks in him and much to the chagrin of his visibly embarrassed wife has decided to impress everyone with how awesome and knowledgeable he is. So of course he asks M to repeat all the specials. M does. Dude starts drilling down to specific ingredients, even asking what kind of herbs are in the béarnaise sauce. It's tarragon. Moron. It's a freaking béarnaise sauce. Now, this is at 8 PM on a Friday night. M and I have 3 other tables of 4 already seated. I'm doing what I can, but M is trapped at this 8 top. Loud guy keeps asking stupid questions and wanting to chat. Finally M says, "Sir, I'm sorry, but I have other tables that need my attention. May I take your order?" Loud guy freaks. "How rude. Blah blah blah." M looks at him and says, "I'm sorry sir, I didn't realize I was here to entertain you," and then he starts dancing. Like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever disco moves. He boogies around the whole table, says to me, "Get this guy's order," and pelvic thrusts his way back to the kitchen, leaving the 8 top speechless. The guy ordered a steak, medium well, butthole. My mom went on a tour of the Coors factory in Golden, CO several years back. At the end of the tour they give you free samples of beer. When asked what she wanted, without even thinking, she asked for a Miller Lite. He gave her a dirty look, filled the glass up halfway with water and halfway with beer, slammed it down and called her a B. True story. That's actually pretty freaking hilarious. Waiter chases me out of a restaurant yelling that I'm cheap and didn't leave her a tip, embarrassing me in front of my friends and everyone in the restaurant. Because she didn't see her $4 under the sugar, I had a $7 bill. It was a very cheap Thai place. I went back to the table and picked up the $4, held it up, put $1 on the table and the rest back in my purse. I decided I wanted to take my boyfriend out to dinner while he was in town. Everything was fine until the server brought the check and I got out my credit card and handed it over. The server points to my boyfriend and said, "Does he beat you too? I guess is it abusive for a male to allow a female to pay on a date?" Not a waitress but a hostess walked me over to a table that still had dirty plates on it and tried to seat me. I asked if I could have the table next to it that was cleaned off. She rolled her eyes, huffed and then threw the menus at me and stormed off. It was so ridiculously bad that I just laughed. Those 2 tables probably belonged to 2 different server sections. The dirtier table probably belonging to the server with less customers. She was probably trying to even things out. Regardless, she didn't have to be a B. Wasn't said to me, it was said about me. I was in Kansas City at this too hip little restaurant that consisted of little more than a bar, a stage for the jazz band, and a few tables. I was in from out of town visiting friends from college, and was sitting at the bar with them for about an hour waiting for a table to open up. When one finally did, the waitress came over to get us more drinks and talk about the menu, which was all prix fixe, on which all of the items were based around meat. I'm a fairly strict vegetarian, so I'd had my reservations about going to the restaurant in the first place. I told the waitress very politely that I was vegetarian and if they couldn't make me anything I was perfectly happy to just nurse my martini for the rest of the night. About 15 minutes later, one of the chefs came out and sat down at the table. The first words out of her mouth were, "So one of the waitresses came in to tell me that some dorky looking F wanted us to make him a freaking vegetarian meal. And what did you say to her?" I replied. "Well, first I told her to not call my best friend a F. TLDR. Went to a restaurant where my best friend from college is one of the chefs, and the waitress unknowingly talked crap about me to her. Oh man. A twist ending. I love it." "You're lying. This is what you ordered. This happened in a Waffle House. The waitress just didn't want to admit that she messed up our order." I went to Budokan in Philadelphia with a group of friends. I was sitting next to a chubby girl. The waitress came and was taking orders. When it was the chubby girl's turn to order, she took her time contemplating and ordered a salad and water. The waitress muttered under her breath, but loud enough where I heard it clearly, as did the girl, "UHH. Who are you fooling?" The chubby girl face turned bright red and those close by that heard were shell shocked and didn't say anything, not wanting to embarrass her further. Needless to say, I never went back. My granduncle was a Navy Seabee in his younger days, and before he died I took him to some kind of Seabee reunion at the naval base in our state. On the way home we stopped at some random joint to get some food. My uncle ordered a whole rotisserie chicken. When the waitress brought it to him, he noticed that it was missing a drumstick. My uncle got the waitress's attention and told her that his chicken was missing a leg. Without missing a beat she said, "You gonna eat it or dance with it?" I'm sorry, but that's hilarious. It's not so much what she said, but what she didn't say. I was at a restaurant with my two employers who are white, and I am not. The waitress asked them what they wanted to drink, and she didn't even acknowledge me. She didn't even take my order, and one of the guys I was with had to order for me. One of the guys I was with had to punch her in the face for me. Much better. Waiter, I just want to let you know this is my last day, so I don't give a frick what you think. Before I could say anything he smiled and started telling my wife and I how had just found out he got a teaching job in Mass. After looking for 5 years. He lets us know he was only joking, but had been dying to say that to someone since he found out. He gave us excellent service and received a good tip. I'm the nightlife coordinator for Caesar Entertainment in AC, so most of the managers and higher ups know me. However, unless I'm at one of the nightclubs, the employees usually don't know me. I went to eat at one of new restaurants with a bachelorette party and decided to wait for them by the bar. I order a drink and about 5 minutes later a bartender walks over to me and says I need to move because I'm sitting there with one drink and she could be getting other customers. Mind you, it's a sit down bar and she singled me out. I'm waiting for some friends. I don't give a frick. You're sitting here alone with one drink. I have more important groups I could be waiting on. Move. Tell you what, get your manager to make me move and I'll gladly step away. It's at this point she grabs 2 security guards and the manager, all of whom know me very well. I told him to get the frick up and move and he told me he's not going to unless you tell him. The manager, probably because he could fire me. That's nightlife coordinator for the 4 properties. Her. What? Me. To her. You're fired. TL. DR. B bartender was rude to me. Didn't I know I was a higher up? Got fired on the spot. In reverse, the most horrifying tipping experience I've ever had was on a first date with a guy at a semi-fancy restaurant in LA. We were seated at our table, having a good time when the waiter came to take our order. After ordering, my date put $21 bills on the table and informed the waiter that every time he did something incorrectly, he would take $1 away, and for every 5 minutes we waited for our food he would take away $2. My date ended up leaving $3 to an incredibly nice waiter, so I left $25 in tip, called him an butthole and never called him again. I was at dinner with my parents and a group of their friends. The waitress was being extremely rude. She did things like say to our one overweight friend, "Are you sure you want 2 entrees?" I'm not wrapping it up well. One member of our party was undergoing chemo at the time and was wearing a non-obvious wig. She is not one to be bullied. At one point during the meal, the waitress made a snide comment to her, and she stopped, put down her utensils and pulled the wig off of her bald head. She looked directly at the waitress and said, "Don't frick with me, I'm sick." Then went back to her meal. It was wonderful. Your friend has freaking ovaries of steel. I've told this story before on Reddit. I work as a waiter at a Thai restaurant. I have different greetings for groups. All girls, "Hey ladies, how's it going?" All boys, "Hey guys, how's it going?" Mixed, "Hey folks, how's it going?" Well, this table of regulars come in. They are all females and they are all lesbians. My brain decided to have a moment there, and I mixed up all the greetings into one. "Hey F, how's it going?" I immediately covered my mouth and apologized for about 5 minutes explaining how that happened. I have no problems with any gay culture. I gave them 20% off and they left me a $8 tip for a $30 meal. They still come in and they'll joke about it every now and then to me. Dodge a bullet there. Do you want to freaking wait a minute? God, after being seated for 20 minutes and not having a waiter come over, I went over to the serving station as their conversation wasn't going to end anytime soon. I was polite and just asked could I order. 20 minutes wasn't an exaggeration either. Was on lunch with a co-worker and she was getting pretty pee off. My brother and I were both adopted from Korea and my parents are straight up white. When I was 8, brother was about 11. We went to an Italian restaurant and the waiter was literally yelling at us like we couldn't speak English. My dad is very conservative, laid back kind of guy. He looks the bee in the eye and says, "Crap, racist enough? That's my daughter you're yelling at who reads English at a college level. Can speak it and understand it just fine without you yelling in her ear. Thanks. You can tone it down." Yeah, our meal was free. Slightly off topic, but your comment made me remember this. I have a friend who is Indian, but grew up in California and has no Indian accent at all. More than once she has had conversations with white Americans who tell her, "I can't understand your accent." It's like they expect to hear an accent, so they hear one. I don't understand it. I once went to meet up some friends at an Asian restaurant. I'm 23, but unfortunately I look like I'm 16 or 17. It's a semi-awesome thing to have. Anyway, when I get there the lady tells me we don't serve underage kids without adults. I get this often, so all I do is flash her my driver's license, but for some reason I guess she thought it was fake. So she ends up grabbing it, cutting it up in front of me and then phoning the police. Fun times were had. Went to Starbucks about 6 months ago and ordered a mocha or something similar. Barista, that's a girly drink. After I pick it up, I'm at the front of the counter and she's right next to me. She walks all the way to the other side of the counter to set it down, instead of just handing it to me. Thinking she was joking, I say, me, laughing, "Oh, I have to walk all the way over there?" Barista, straight face, "You look like you could use the exercise. I'm not overweight." Me, "Can you split the check please?" Waiter, "I don't see why you guys can't do it yourself. Didn't you learn basic math skills?" "I learned enough to subtract your tip." I used to be a server at a Thai restaurant. One couple asked how spicy a dish was and I told them without thinking that they would have to crap in a river tomorrow to keep from setting their house on fire. They laughed so hard they almost cried. Not exactly rude, but not exactly a nice thing to tell someone before a meal. You are starting to become a very needy table. This is after they made my steak wrong, so I sent it back and I asked them for another bottle of $60 wine. I was a little pee. And you are starting to become a very low tipped waiter. When ordering a dessert at Olive Garden, a waiter looked pronouncedly at my belly and said, "Are you sure you should do that? I was 7 months pregnant." It wasn't anything the waiter said, but his actions spoke loud and clear. My boyfriend, my friend, and I went to a bar and grill that was pretty nice. The waiter came to take our order and started with my boyfriend and was very friendly with him. When it came around to me, he took my order in a rush. Our food comes but I get mine last. The waiter comes around to check on us and specifically asks my boyfriend if the steak was cooked right and if he liked it. He didn't ask anyone else, just him. When time came to box the leftovers, the waiter tosses my box onto my food and helps to box my boyfriend's food. I even sat there to see if he would do the same for me. Not that I expected him to, and he walked away after helping my boyfriend. Everybody just kinda looked at each other and we started laughing. How about the inverse? I spoke to my manager and we think it would be best for our matron to find you a reservation at a different restaurant this evening. Classiest way I've ever been thrown out of a place. I arrived late and met my friends at a 24-hour breakfast place. They were eating and I sat down. The waitress came over and I asked if I could have a glass of water. No, and then she walked off. Never got water. I'm pretty sure it's illegal for a restaurant to deny a person water in most places. I know it is in California at least. Not exactly a waiter, but an airline hostess story. I fell asleep on a flight, and I guess my foot was in the aisle. I have to guess, because I was asleep. I woke up when the drink cart was driven straight over my foot, to which I replied glug, and that is why we don't put our feet in the aisles, passengers. And then she ran over my foot with the back wheel. Luckily it was just a short hop from ATL to LAX, so it was only another 2 hours of not killing her with my bare hands. I ended up getting a first class upgrade on the flight back after I called up to complain. This is the greatest thread I've read. BTW. I used to work at a country club, and I remember on my first day, my boss strictly advised that if you drop a glass or plate, anything that could will shatter. Advise everyone to stay away from the area, stay seated and whatnot until the mess is cleaned up. And I mean strongly advised it. So, of course, a week or so later, I was walking between a few tables one night and had a couple of glasses of water. I got one of them to the table, greeting the older couple, and then went for the other and it fell to the floor, shattering. Panicked, I continued to say, "I'm so sorry, please forgive me. Wait just one moment and I'll get this cleaned up." The older man laughed and said, "It's all good, I'll be right back anyway." Need to hit the men's room. Right then I see my boss staring me down, and in a panic I yelled, "Sit the frick down and stay calm." Luckily, he looked at me and burst out laughing. "Alright then, I'll wait. My bladder ain't that bad yet." My boss and all my co-workers thought it was the most hilarious thing they'd seen. Even though that was over 6 years ago, my friends from there still won't let me live it down. Several years ago, my family went to a local place. Denny's comes to mind, but I don't remember if they do seating or not. Either way, it was some chain where they seat you. Sorry, I was a kid at the time. Edit, asked parents. It was definitely Denny's. There was a black family ahead of us. Dad, mom, little girl. Not badly dressed. Obviously not dressed up, but it was clear they weren't a bad crowd. The restaurant was almost completely empty customer wise. They waited for 25 minutes for someone to seat them. Finally got sick of it and left to go to the place across the street. As soon as they walk out the door, someone came to seat us. We left for the restaurant across the street. I like my steak medium rare. I'm not terribly picky about it, but one time the steak I got was pretty much past well done, and it was dry as frick. So, I complained. "Excuse me, I ordered the steak medium rare. It's pretty close to burnt." The waitress was young and pretty, and she just gave me this confused look. "Well, what do you want me to do?" she asks. "We can't uncook the steak." Sometimes, after a long day in the service industry, you don't even notice that you've become a little bit rude. I got let go for the following. Customer, "Excuse me sir, what's goat cheese?" Me, pause for a moment to see if she's kidding. "Why, it's cheese. Made from the milk of a goat. Earthy and a bit tart." It was the way that I said it. I couldn't help it. It was just condescending. I am always very proper and well spoken at a table. Fine dining. And it just seemed so snooty. The owner was right behind me. At the end of the shift, she told me that I needed a break from serving tables. She was right. Sometimes there's no way to not sound condescending. I work for Starbucks and we had a honey syrup at one point. Was awful. It tasted too much exactly like honey, and someone asked me what it tasted like and I responded without thinking, "Honey." I am a UK size 10, which is a US size 6. I believe. Edit. Apparently it may be an 8. Googling was inconclusive. I informed my waiter at Mexican restaurant chain Oaxaca that I am a vegan. He said, "I thought vegans were meant to be thin." Oaxaca is an awful name for an authentic Mexican restaurant. Not a waiter, but at a shoe store. I asked for a pair of shoes in my size. Female, size 10. I have big monster feet. I know. And the girl looked at me and said, we don't have any shoes that size. I don't think they make women's shoes that size. I didn't know a woman could have feet that big. The rudest thing a waiter did was serve me a slice of pork in a chicken sandwich. I am a Sikh and don't really have many dietary restrictions, but I assumed the waiter thought I was Muslim. I just took out the slice and ate it. I was meeting a very prominent and highly respected public figure at the club. He had told my group that the dress code was casual, so we were mostly wearing jeans and dress or polo shirts. When we got there, the matron looked us up and down as though we were the scum of his shoe and said, in the most posh, stuck-up tone I have ever heard, I believe you'll have trouble finding a table here wearing dungarees, and he started to walk away. Then we told him who we were here to meet, and the guy nearly crap himself. When something that ridiculous happens, I can't help but laugh, because for a split second I forget that I am in reality and not at home watching a TV show. I've even said out loud I thought people only talked like that in comedies and teen movies, while everyone stands there in disbelief. I am so disconnected from society. The old Chicago Berghoff restaurant was great. All old white waiters in black uniforms. I take all my brothers and sister there and we get an old African American waiter for the first time. We are all Mexican. My little 8-year-old brother whispers too loudly that he is gonna kill us. He takes the orders and comes back with the food and says he has something special for my little brother. He blindfolds him with a napkin and when he lifts it to peek at his impending death, the waiter whips out a squirt gun and shoots him in the face. He was tipped 100% and lil brother learned a lesson about racism. He is a professor of geology out west now. My dad told me this story. He and my mother met when they worked as a waiter and waitress in NYC back in the 1940s. Fast forward to 1980, they were out to dinner with a bunch of friends. The waiter was rude and or inept. The food was cold. The evening was only saved by good friends and good conversation. My dad was in charge of the check. He collected money from everyone and figured on a 12% minus 13% tip, as he figured the waiter may have been having a bad night and the cold food was not his fault. My dad left the money with the check and they all left. The waiter chased out to the parking lot after my dad held out the tip he was given and said, "Do you really think this is fair? Or do you not get out often and don't know how to tip?" My dad looked at the waiter and said, "Well, I was a waiter for many years and yeah, I know how to tip. I gave you the benefit of the doubt, figuring you were just having a bad night. But you're right, this amount is not right." Whereupon my dad took a $10 from the waiter and continued, "Now it's right." And he got into his car and left. After spilling some apple juice, the waitress said something like, "I'm sorry, I'll get you some napkins," then immediately followed that up with, "Even though it's your fault, I knew it was my fault. I also knew you were apologizing in a sympathetic way, not taking responsibility." To be honest, that's something I would do. "I'm sorry, insert thing they did wrong. Oh, crap, they think I'm an idiot. Apologizing for something I didn't do. Without thinking. Continue even though it's your fault, frick. That just made it worse." Runs off. Assuming the Italian had any sorts of standards, telling staff you wanted to give it to your dogs is a pretty big insult. Anyway, once at a Chinese restaurant the waiter yelled at me for only leaving a 10% tip. I usually give at least 15% for average service, but this was beyond bad. He refused to let us order some items because we wouldn't like them. He never brought out utensils, or napkins, or water. Then he brought out the wrong food and brought the bill unprompted. 10% was freaking generous. At a Thai place, the waiter told me I couldn't handle a dish because it was too spicy for a white person. I ordered it anyway, and it was obvious he asked for a mild version. When I asked why, he repeated that I was too white. Actually, I've tried getting that dish full strength, but every time I try they either refuse or secretly make it mild. And yes, I know it should be spicier because a friend of mine works there. I'm just amazed by how many of the people in this thread still tipped their server after getting such bad service. That crap makes no sense to me. Once went to a fancy restaurant where they grind the pepper at your table. Waiter said, "Say when." Then when I said, "That's fine. Thanks," idiot kept on grinding. Finally I said when and he smirked at me for complying, I guess. What an absolute jackass. He ruined your food to make a joke. This wasn't a waiter, but a bartender, and last night, it was almost the end of the night, bar was clearing out and I asked for a glass of water. He nods and walks down to the other side of the bar and starts taking their drink orders. I stood there, waiting, while he continued to serve other people. I finally got him again and said, "Hey, I am the DD and would just like a glass of water," and he said, "Yeah, I heard you, but you aren't gonna make me any money. You are asking for a favor, and I only do favors for my friends." Man, that is disgusting. Bars and the people that work in them should always encourage using a designated driver. We were in a Portuguese restaurant and we asked the waiter if he was Portuguese. He said, "No, I am French," and stares at us. So my dad says, "Oh, that's nice. We are Portuguese but France and Portugal are near each other. No big difference," the waiter replies. "Yes, but French people aren't full of hair." And he never came back. I beg to differ. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.